The Whale is a movie I wanted to watch for a long time. I finally watched it and I'm sure glad I did because this is one of the best movies I've watched in a while. Let's talk about that. Hey guys, I'm Carl. Welcome to my movie film show. Feel free to subscribe down below if you would like to, but we're here today to talk about The Whale. Brendan Fraser's return in a Darren Aronofsky movie about a big fat guy who needs to get his life in order. Something like that. Now I was putting off watching this movie because I kept finding other movies that were catching my attention. But all those movies that were catching my attention were letting me down. So I said, okay, let's finally check out The Whale because the Oscars are on this weekend. Hopefully I get the review out before then. And Brendan Fraser might be winning some awards. Maybe the film itself will win some awards. Now obviously this movie hit the headlines for the return of Brendan Fraser. He's phenomenal in this movie. Put on a lot of weight, reportedly around 300 pounds just to play the role, and still had to wear a 300-pound fat suit on top of that to create the character. Brendan Fraser has been in some phenomenal movies down the years. He's also been in some terrible movies as his career began to fall off a little bit. But it's great to see him back in this role because he really gets to show what a fantastic actor he is. All the hype you've heard about his performance isn't hype, it's real. His performance is fantastic in the movie. He deserves all the awards he has been getting. The movie overall is so interesting. It's a one location movie where it predominantly takes place in his apartment. The story has so many elements to it and it just showcases what a phenomenal director Darren Aronofsky is, that he can keep an audience's attention in that small space and fill it with so much story. There's so many aspects that happen between Brendan Fraser's character's relationship with his daughter, his relationship with his wife, his ex-wife, the guy who comes and saves his life, the pizza delivery guy, what happened with his ex-lover, and all of this happens in a movie that begins with a guy having a wank on a couch. I don't know why that was the start of the movie, why that needs to be the start of the movie. I guess it's some shock factor, but yeah, it was an interesting start to a movie, all right. It's certainly not the start I was expecting to the movie, but yeah, it certainly grabs your attention. It's like, what the hell am I watching? But then the story slowly evolves and becomes quite interesting. The fascinating part of the movie is the character Brendan Fraser is playing, because he's playing this morbidly obese man who's so big he can't walk in his own power. He can't stand up by himself. They show various points where eating kind of becomes the enemy, where he feels bad so he eats, he feels sad so he eats. He looks up the mortality of people his size because of his weight, and that just makes him more depressed, so he eats again. And even subtle things like they really ramp up the sound effects of chewing and sloshing around the food in his mouth. Like there's a scene where he eats 2 slices of pizza on top of each other and the sound effects are really sloshing, and I think it just completely turned me off pizza personally. The movie, don't get me wrong, the movie is not saying, hey, being fat is terrible, you know, people are people, do what you do. There's also the story elements with the maid, or the woman who is like his maid. She comes and cleans and helps him with food and helps him out with things, and is a nurse as well. That element of the story is fantastic too. I don't want to give too much away about the story because there's various elements of the story. There's just so much story happens within the apartment that he's living in. Sadie Sink is in there too, playing his daughter, who of course we know from Stranger Things, and she also gives a phenomenal performance in the movie. Sure, she's playing a moody teenager at the beginning, which is kind of what she did when she came into Stranger Things, but she does towards the end of the movie in particular. Her performance just goes from strength to strength to strength. And this movie is just a perfect example of how you don't need mega money, you don't need superheroes or even old stories, although there is references obviously to Moby Dick in this one, and a lot of similarities to Moby Dick between, you know, The Whale and all that. This movie just emphasizes what I've said a lot on this channel. The key thing with movies is the story. If you don't have a good story, you don't have anything. And on the flip side, if you've got a phenomenal story told really well, you don't need all this side dressing. You don't need, you know, huge casts and big special effects and shiny things on screen. You just need a story that's told really well. And The Whale is a story that's told really well. At certain points in this movie, I was truly captivated and couldn't turn my eyes away from the screen. The movie flew by at an electric pace as well, because I can't remember the runtime exactly, perhaps around 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer, but I remember at the end of it going, wow, it's over already. Darren Aronofsky has that power at the end of the movie to just leave you going, wow. I remember I had that feeling when I watched Black Swan as well. Right at the very end, I just sat there kind of in stunned silence saying, wow, that was a special movie. And the budget for this movie was only $3 million, which is very low by Hollywood standards. It just shows what can be accomplished on low budgets. There's a lot of people out there going, $3 million isn't low budget, but for Hollywood, it certainly is. So ultimately, we get down to a rating out of 10 for The Whale. And as I've waxed lyrical about this movie so far, it won't be any surprise to know I'm going to give it a pretty high rating. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Borderline 9. It's not the best movie I watched in the last year, but is a fantastic movie which I'd highly recommend checking out. Another movie that I think is a phenomenal movie worth checking out, and actually a movie I think that will win an Oscar this year, perhaps even for Best Picture, is The Fabelmans. My review for that's right over here. And if you've already seen that one, I've got a whole video about Quentin Tarantino which you should definitely check out right over here.